They are the people who elect a government that runs a global empire that is hated by the rest of the world and also hated by the American people themselves. So, potentially, American people are the most powerful people in the world. I know they're not in a good place at the moment, but that's because they haven't really thought things through, and I have gone out of my way to be helpful to Americans to explain to them what is the nature of their predicament. And I am saying they are helpless against their internal enemies. Forget immigrants. And even forget Jews, although I know many of them are anti-Semites, and forget Muslims. I know many of them are Islamophobes. The enemy is within. So even as they complain about Jews and complain about Muslims, somebody let them in and somebody raised Jews and Muslims above ordinary Americans who are not Jews or Muslims. So something has happened, and I'm saying, well, obviously your moral system has failed because it's failed to protect you from your internal enemies, and because you are helpless against your internal enemies, your ruling classes let in external enemies and make your country vulnerable to your external enemies. If you're going to be fighting wars with foreign countries, then obviously, potentially, foreign countries will be your enemy, particularly if your ruling classes don't exercise diplomacy in dealing with other countries. Currently, the most important foreign country is Israel, but is it really a foreign country, or is it just another one of the 51st states of America? After all, America is a global empire, and this means that NATO member states are, in fact, unofficially anyway, the 51st states of America. And because of the failure of American diplomacy, it is increasingly, or America is increasingly resented. I started this stream by saying that Americans are the most important people in the world, and they are the most important people in the world because they're the only people who can get rid of their ruling classes, who are the equivalent of the driver of a coach. So if their ruling classes are determined to drive the coach carrying Americans into a brick wall, then they should be doing something about it. They should, well, if the driver is dead at the wheel, then somehow make it from the passenger seat to the driver's seat and take over the driving. But it doesn't appear that Americans are capable of doing that. They are, it seems, in denial about whether the coach is indeed heading for a brick wall, or perhaps they are in some way incapacitated and that they cannot arise from their passenger seat to get to the driver's seat to drive the coach properly. As you know, I have been talking almost exclusively to Americans because I don't feel that it is necessary to talk to anyone else. There's no point talking to Europeans who are citizens of US vassal states whose politicians unquestioningly obey the orders of Washington. So what can American people do, the most powerful people in the world capable of getting rid of the global hegemon that is so globally resented? Are they capable of rational thought? Are they capable of questioning their own political system or acknowledging that their lack of an official moral system is the cause of their vulnerability to their incompetent and corrupt ruling classes? It appears not. So while I temporarily have the support of an American secular Quranist, it was not going to be permanent because she cannot understand the necessity of adhering to principle and taking the literal interpretation of the Quran, because really, I suppose she doesn't really believe in it. There are all these people claiming to be Jews, Christians, and Muslims who are in fact atheists. They don't really believe. Or they are so lacking in self-awareness that they don't know what they're doing. They don't know that they are guilty of hidden idolatry, and when you explain it to them, their pride can't take it because they don't understand what you're saying to them, and basically they prefer their own dumb opinions. Now, there will be people who might ask if I'm someone worshipping my own dumb opinions. I very willingly engage with people who question me and have done so for over a decade. You can question me all you like. I just don't remember losing an argument. And if I have lost an argument, I would change my behaviour. I would change my beliefs because I submit to undisputed truths. So the problem is these Muslims who are so lacking in intellect that they cannot deviate from their incorrect view that Zionism is unmitigated evil. They have to do their groupthink. They have to submit to the groupthink that Muslims have of their anti-Semitism, which means that they have to be anti-Zionist. And this means that they can't actually understand that you can be a Zionist without being well-intentioned towards Jews. And I am making the point that Nazis were Zionists, and Nazis actually had to be Zionists if they wanted to expel their unwanted Jews, because if you want to get rid of something, you have to take it out, right? You have to take it out with the trash. So that's why you have dustmen who take away your garbage. There are waste collections. So it is really the idea that you have to remove something unwanted on your premises and put them somewhere else. So if you don't want something that's in your property and you want them removed, then you have to put it somewhere, right? So this is as simple as I can make it. And perhaps somebody will now understand why Nazis and Russians and people who want their Jews removed and put somewhere else might be Zionists, and therefore to be anti-Zionist is not necessarily to hate Jews, because there are Jews who are anti-Zionist, such as Neturei Carter, who are of the opinion that when you're in Rome, you must do as the Romans do, and if the Romans worship Allah and live under Sharia, this must be what Jews must do too. So I don't really see what the problem is. I mean, I'm sure Jews would readily acknowledge that what is halal is not kosher, but what is kosher is halal, and this means that Jews have higher standards, or observant Jews have higher standards of observance than Muslims. So I'm saying that what is halal is not kosher. It's not sufficient to be kosher, but what is kosher is halal. This is something Jews and Muslims can agree on. So back to the question of idolatry. Jews and Muslims should be able to agree with each other that Christianity is idolatry, but I'm afraid their minds are not on theological matters. What they seem to be bent on doing is to compete with each other for greater victimhood. So Jews will say, oh, look what Hamas did to us. And Muslims will say, look how many Muslims Jews have killed in response to a fraction of the Jews that we killed. Without realising that nobody cares, not really. Obviously, anti-Semites would pretend to care about Muslim casualties, and obviously Islamophobes would pretend to care about Jewish casualties. But really, this habit of anti-Semites throwing the corpses of Palestinians at Jews, and the habit of Islamophobes throwing the corpses of Jews at Muslims is not going to work, because it's fundamentally insincere. I imagine if these anti-Semites and Islamophobes could get what they want, they would throw both Jews and Muslims out of their country. But they can't do anything about it because they are helpless. They are helpless because they don't have a moral system. Their political system of democracy has failed. And that is why I propose a one-party theocracy that, sadly, Carol cannot bring herself to support because, well, she's a frightened old lady who doesn't want it to be known that she supports Sharia for her fellow Americans. This is the bottom line, really. She hasn't got the courage of her convictions as a Muslim to give up her preference for democracy, for representative democracy, because it's still too much of an idol for her to cease worshipping. So what she really worships is representative democracy, even though she knows that representative democracy was what got her and her fellow Americans to where they are now, which is a matriarchy for prioritising the preferences of unmarried parents and their bastards. We know we can't easily assume that she's herself morally compromised. She will have family members who are unmarried parents who are still Christian or profess to have Christian beliefs, and she won't obey chapter 18, verse 4 of the Quran that says, admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son, because she would rather not do that. She would rather not alienate Christian family members. She's not really going to rock the boat that much. So she's going to be nice to Christians. She's going to continue being a Democrat, carrying on voting in the hope of voting a president into power that will fix everything. How retarded is that? It is very retarded, isn't it? But still, there are people who are prepared to die on the hill of their retarded ideas that they cannot defend, because it is their ideas. It's their long-cherished beliefs. So it's very simple. It's a problem of idolatry, and when you understand how this system works, you will know that anyone who, even as they claim to be Muslim, don't adhere to Quranic principles, don't really believe in what they're supposed to believe, well, they're just hypocrites whose final destination is hell. So Carol has blocked me because she can't explain or defend William's arguments about Allah not being Zionist. It is my contention that Allah, if he exists, is a Zionist, as expressed in chapter 1704 of the Quran, that tells Israelites to dwell in the land of Israel until the end times. I mean, what else does it mean other than that Allah is a Zionist? But you can't mention that to Muslims without their heads exploding, and when their heads explode, well, I guess they're no good for rational debate. So if anybody would like to question William about what he might possibly mean in his paper, they should do so. I've had a few exchanges with him, and he says he's managed to get a few Muslims to read it, but they don't want to discuss it with me. He won't tell me what they said about it, and my response to any of his papers being read by anyone would be to ask if these people whom he claims read his papers, which are fine examples of verbal diarrhea. Do they ever read to the end? And if they do they even know what he means? And if they do read it, is English their first language? And I suspect no. The answer to all that is no, no, no. So the most important question to be asked is, if you believe in God, and I know people don't, even the people who claim to be Jews, Christians and Muslims, they don't really believe, because if they did, they would wonder what God's opinion on that might be, and they never ask themselves that question. And I guess they don't. They only talk about bombs and terrorist attacks and how many people were murdered by whoever. They only talk about war casualties because beyond that they can't reason. So these Muslims, do they even care or know what their holy book actually says in chapter 17 of verse 104? They are making the category error of conflating Zionism with unmitigated evil. Carol herself has called Zionism a perversion of what she won't answer. And another one of her nonsensical tweets is that I confuse Israelites. How shall I put it? I am. She's blocked me now, so I can't easily look up what she said. Yes, I think she said, I'm confused about the difference between Israelites and something else. And she didn't even mention the second thing. You know, when you say between A and B. So, so a sentence was, I'm confused between Israelite, and the sentence ended. So I said, between Israelites and what? And she never answered. So I suppose I should be pleased that these two Muslims can't defend themselves against my argument that Allah is Zionist. So it's very revealing, but not that the Muslims care because they just don't think like that. They don't talk about theology. They don't even want to engage with Jews because you would have thought they could be making certain arguments that I have been proposing that they make, but I don't think they even understand what I'm trying to say because they're too busy competing with Jews for victimhood. So I have a few comments by Efrant for you in the chat. I'm not really sure what he's saying. Okay, perhaps I should define Zionism. Zionism is the idea that of a Jewish homeland, right? This is all it is. Jews should have a homeland, and you either agree with it or you don't. And I assume the reason why the idea of Zionism creates so much anti-Semitism is again, the Gentiles are jealous that Jews have a word for it called Zionism. I mean, there are people, Gentiles, who ask for a homeland, but their desire for a homeland doesn't have a name like Zionism. So I think it's just because they're a bit stupid, right? They're not very creative with ideas, and maybe it's because they haven't been around or whatever. But let's think of people who might be seeking a homeland. They would be, well, I suppose you can think of, white nationalists. I guess they can say maybe you can call it ethnostatism, but then ethnostatism isn't centered on any particular piece of land, and we know that Richard Spencer hasn't even chosen a state in America in which to have his ethno-state. So, you can see that these Gentiles, they just haven't got the ability to think things right through before their brain fizzes up into some kind of ADHD state, and they just forget what they were talking about, and then they move on to something else. So Jews have this word called Zionism, and these Gentiles, they can't even think of a word. I mean, for their own desire for land. I mean, uh, so the so I think the best Hamas can do is to say, well, you can live here, Jews, if you live under Sharia, which actually is a pretty good argument, because I don't think it would really wash if the Palestinians said, we want to call our desire to have an ethno-state Palestinianism because, well, it's a new word and it just sounds silly, but Zionism, it's been around for quite a while and people take it seriously. I guess it's because, you know, it's a concept created by Jews, immediately commanding some kind of reluctant respect. So the problem with Gentiles, with anti-Semites, with white nationalists, is that they're not capable of thinking things through or sticking to their principles because they haven't, and even when they convert to Islam, they're just not capable of the intellectual creativity of um, inventing ideas and words, and they're not morally capable of sticking to their principles or even knowing what they are. So, if you're Muslim, then you would have to avoid idolatry, and you would have to obey the Quran. And if the Quran says, admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son, then you have to follow it and not make up shit excuses for not doing so and saying, oh, we've never done it, so we're never going to do it now. And inventing it. Crap excuses like, oh, Washington may have warned us against political parties, but we've been having political parties, so we're just going to carry on doing it. So what I get is, shit excuses after shit excuses, and just no sign of any regret or admission or weakness or error. It's all, well, I feel like this because I think so, even though it's completely unsupported by opinion and fact. So this is the problem. This is a problem of people who can't follow principles and don't know what the hell it is that they're supposed to believe, or who are easily distracted by their degenerate ADHD. If you can't think straight, if you can't stick to your principle, you can convert to any religion you like, but if you don't follow it, then it won't work. And sadly, for these people who convert to Islam, they have to sort of, follow the usual shit of, well, well, they were anti-Semites to begin with, right? Lower class people just tend to be anti-Semites. They can't help it. They hate everyone above them, And what else? Yeah, they hate everyone above them, and of course, the Jew, the, the head explodes, right? They don't like a ruling class. Like, well, or you don't have a ruling class who's going to rule over you. What, people like you can govern yourselves. Fuck off. All you have is the terror and mob rule. But, well, if you don't even understand that, then and you persist in conflating conflating Zionism with evil and the elites with evil, then what are you going to do? You won't have a ruling class. You won't have well, you'd be going against God. I mean, because if God is Zionist, then you would be going against God, which is heresy and blasphemy, and well, you won't even know that you're doing it. And it's all about lacking in self-awareness. So, Evelyn, for you to say, um, Zionism seems to be an effort to make a Jews only nation. Not if you read chapter 1704, because it says Jews will Jews are to dwell in Israel in a commingled crowd, which means, well, with Gentiles until the end time. So that's what it says. If you don't believe me, check out chapter 1704. I don't know who Michael Cohen is. Who decides what tribe is lost? I don't know. Whoever cares that they're lost. What tribe is running Israel? I guess that's quite a good question in that I would say America is running Israel. I mean, that's what, all these anti-Semites complain about, these American anti-Semites, wanting not to be funding Israel. I mean, we know that Israel is being funded by America. I mean, the Iron Dome, and I think it's $100 billion every year that is being spent on Israel and its defences because of the fact that it is an American colonial outpost in the middle of the Middle East, and that is what is causing problems. So I think, enough Jews know that that's what they are. They're not the Holy Land because they're not a Torah theocracy, and the recent elections has shown that it is the liberal Supreme Court that gets its way. So the Israeli Supreme Court gets to veto legislation from the Knesset. And it has also been reported that it was the American State Department that funded all the demonstrations against Netanyahu's proposal to reform the Israeli Supreme Court. Israel is not a location or territory. I mean, of course it is. I don't know. Why would you be saying something like that? Israel is a spiritual. No, it's not. It's a piece of territory with a government and a people. Why do people say crazy things like that? How can you just pretend that a country doesn't exist? It is much to ask a man to fight for a chosen deity. Okay, that's a complete nonsense. I don't even know what that means. People can't even write coherent sentences that make sense. Yes, I know nobody watches, nobody's viewing this because nobody really cares about theology. They just prefer, the same old shit. What else is anybody saying? Do they have any ideas? They'll be saying, oh, look at these Jews being killed by all these horrible Muslims. Oh, or look at all these Muslims being killed by all those horrible Jews. And that's it. And they're happy with that shit. So the problem is, well, all these Americans who they sort of get it and they sort of don't. They know they don't have a moral system. They don't have an official religion. but they don't want to ask for it, like Carol, like William. They know democracy is dementia, it is kaput, but they don't want to ask for anything better in case people look funny at them. And in the case of Carol, I mean, she's using an anonymous avatar, but she still doesn't have the courage to say it, even as an anonymous account. I mean, how pathetic can you get? So it's all a waste of time. You can go to her YouTube channel and there's just nothing there. She's deleted everything again. Hey ho. So to sum up, the solution is simple, but you dare not speak of it because you are morally and intellectually crippled by your lack of principle and your lack of moral fortitude to see the whole thing through or even complete a thought. Is fundamentally the problem of the degenerate Westerner living in his or her matriarchy.